I have been a locksmith for 12 years. Most people think my job is just popping car doors for people who forgot their keys at the grocery store or rekeying a front door when a roommate moves out. And mostly, it is. It is mundane. It is routine. But the thing about locks is that they are designed to keep things out or keep things in. When you are the guy holding the skeleton key to the city, you eventually open a door you wish you hadn't. This happened about 4 years ago. I was going through a rough patch financially. My wife had just been laid off, and we had a baby on the way. I was taking every job that came through, no matter how late or how far. It was a Thursday night, almost midnight, when my personal cell rang. That was the first red flag. Customers usually call the business line. This number was unlisted. The voice on the other end was a man. He sounded calm, articulate, but there was a tightness to his tone, like a violin string stretched to the snapping point. He told me his name was Marcus. He said he had an emergency and needed a heavy-duty deadbolt installed immediately. He emphasized the word immediately. I told him I could be there in the morning. He cut me off. He said he would pay me $1,500 cash if I came right now. $1,500. That is 5 times my usual emergency rate. I hesitated, but the thought of the mounting medical bills made the decision for me. I took the address. It was in the Palisades, a wealthy neighborhood of sprawling estates and high hedges. The kind of place where the driveways are longer than most people's streets. I pulled up to the gate, buzzed in, and drove up to a massive modern house. It was all glass and sharp angles, looking more like an art museum than a home. Marcus met me at the door. He was a tall man, impeccably dressed in a suit despite the hour. He didn't smile. He didn't shake my hand. He just motioned for me to follow him. The inside of the house was freezing. The air conditioning was blasting, and it smelled antiseptic, like a hospital corridor. We walked up a floating staircase to the 2nd floor. It was dead silent. I didn't see any photos on the walls, no personal clutter. It felt like a showroom. We reached a solid oak door at the end of the hallway. "This is the room," Marcus said. I knelt down to inspect the existing handle. "Okay, standard install? You want a deadbolt above the handle? Keyed on both sides?" "No," he said. "I want a single-cylinder deadbolt, but I want it installed backward." I stopped and looked up at him. "Backward? You mean with the keyhole facing inside the room?" "No," he corrected, his voice flat. "I mean, I want the keyhole on the hallway side. I want the thumb turn, the latch to unlock it, removed completely from the inside. I want a blank plate on the inside." This was highly irregular. It was a fire hazard. It was against code. "Sir, I can't do that. If there's a fire, whoever is inside that room will be trapped. It's illegal." Marcus sighed, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a thick envelope and held it out. "My daughter, Lily, is 16. She is a severe sleepwalker. Violent. Last week, she walked out of the house and was found walking down the center of the highway. She tries to hurt herself. We have tried alarms, motion sensors, everything. She disables them in her sleep. This is for her safety. We lock it only at night, and my wife and I have the keys. Please, you are saving her life." I looked at the envelope. I looked at the desperate, weary look in his eyes. It was a plausible story. I had heard of extreme sleepwalking cases before, and I needed that money. "I need you to sign a liability waiver," I said, my voice quiet. He nodded eagerly. "Anything." I started the work. I drilled into the beautiful oak door, the sawdust falling onto the pristine white carpet. Marcus stood over me the entire time, watching every turn of the screwdriver. About 20 minutes in, a woman appeared in the hallway. It must have been his wife. She was wearing a silk robe, her hair disheveled. She looked pale, ghost-like. She didn't look at me. She just stared at the door I was working on. Her eyes were red-rimmed and swollen. "Is it done?" she whispered. "Almost," Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming stern. "Go back to bed, Elena." She lingered for a moment, a look of profound sorrow on her face, before turning and drifting back into the master bedroom. It gave me the creeps. The dynamic was off, but I kept my head down. I finished the installation. I tested the bolt. Thunk, click, solid steel. From the inside, there was nothing but a smooth metal plate. No way out. Marcus handed me the envelope. "Thank you," he said. "You can show yourself out." I packed up my tools and practically ran to my van. I counted the cash in the driveway. It was all there. I drove home, but I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the wife's face. I kept thinking about the silence of the house. 2 days passed. The money went into the bank, and the guilt started to fade. Then, on Saturday afternoon, I was organizing my work van when I realized something. My pinning kit, a small, expensive brass case containing all the tiny pins and springs for rekeying locks, was missing. I tore the van apart. It wasn't there. I realized I must have left it on the floor in the hallway at Marcus's house. I called the number he had called me from. It went straight to voicemail. I called again. Nothing. The kit was worth $300, but more importantly, it had custom tools in it I couldn't easily replace. I decided to drive over. It was broad daylight. I figured I'd just knock, get the kit, and leave. I pulled up to the gate. It was open. That was odd. I drove up the long driveway. The front door of the house was standing slightly ajar. My stomach dropped. I knew I should turn around. I knew I should call the police. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. I grabbed a heavy wrench from my belt and walked to the door. "Hello?" I called out. "Marcus?" "It's the locksmith." Silence. The air conditioning was off now. The house was stiflingly hot. I stepped inside. The silence was heavy, oppressive. "Hello?" I walked up the stairs, my heart hammering against my ribs. The house looked exactly the same, but it felt abandoned. I reached the top of the landing. There, sitting on the hallway floor right where I had left it, was my pinning kit. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I bent down to grab it. Then I heard a sound. A scritch. It was coming from behind the door I had installed. I froze. The sound was rhythmic, faint, like a fingernail dragging against wood. "Hello?" I whispered, leaning close to the door. "Is someone in there?" The scratching stopped. Then a voice so raspy and weak, it sounded like dry leaves skittering on pavement. Water. It wasn't a teenager's voice. It sounded old, broken. I looked at the lock. I had the master key on my ring. I always keep a master copy of high security installs for a few days in case of emergencies. My hands were shaking so hard, I dropped the keys twice. "I'm opening the door," I said. I slid the key in. It turned with a smooth click. I pushed the door open. The smell hit me first. It was the stench of unwashed humanity, of rot, of waste. I gagged, covering my nose with my shirt. The room was dark, the blinds nailed shut. I fumbled for the light switch. When the light flickered on, I screamed. It wasn't a bedroom. It was a cell. The walls were covered in scratches. There was a bucket in the corner, and huddled on a stained mattress in the center of the room was not a 16-year-old girl. It was a woman. She looked to be in her 30s, but she was skeletal, her skin gray and covered in sores. She shielded her eyes from the light, cowering. Around her ankle was a heavy chain bolted to the floor. "Please," she rasped. "Please don't hurt me." I stumbled back, my mind reeling. This wasn't a sleepwalking daughter. This was a prisoner. Marcus hadn't been protecting her. He had been upgrading her cage. I'm going to get help," I stammered. I turned to run, and that's when I saw the photos taped to the back of the door. Photos of me. Photos of me in my van. Photos of me at the grocery store. Photos of my pregnant wife. And written in red marker across the bottom of a picture of my house was a single sentence: "You did a good job." I didn't stop running until I was in my van, locking the doors, speeding down the driveway. I called 911 screaming. The police swarmed the house within 10 minutes. They found the woman. Her name was missing from the news reports to protect her identity, but I found out later she had been missing for 7 years. Marcus and Elena were gone. The house was a rental, leased under a fake name. They had cleared out in a hurry. The police interrogated me for hours. They eventually cleared me, realizing I was just a pawn, a tool used to seal the tomb. But they never found Marcus. Sometimes, late at night, when I'm working a job and the street is quiet, I get a feeling that I'm being watched. I check my rearview mirror. I check the locks on my own house 3 times before bed. I took that $1,500 and donated every cent of it. I couldn't touch it. It felt like blood money. I still work as a locksmith, but I have a new rule. I never, ever install a lock that traps someone inside. Because I know now that the monsters don't live under the bed. They live in the master bedroom, wearing expensive suits, asking you to help them hide their secrets. There is a specific kind of loneliness that exists only at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday in November. It's a cold, damp loneliness. I was working the graveyard shift for a roadside assistance company. It was pouring rain, the kind of relentless, freezing rain that turns the world into a gray blur. I was parked in a 7-Eleven lot, drinking terrible coffee when the dispatch tablet on my dashboard beeped. Code: lockout. Location: Rest Area 4B, Interstate 95 northbound. Vehicle: 1998 Ford Taurus green. Rest Area 4B was notorious. It was technically closed for renovations, meaning the bathrooms were locked and the lights were mostly busted. It was 10 miles from the nearest exit. A dead zone. I radioed in. "Dispatch, 4B is closed." "You sure that's the location?" "Affirmative," the dispatcher crackled. "Customer says he pulled over to check a tire, and the wind blew the door shut. Keys in the ignition. Engine running." I sighed, put the truck in gear, and headed out. The highway was empty. My headlights cut through the driving rain, illuminating nothing but wet asphalt and pine trees. When I took the exit for the rest area, the darkness seemed to swallow the truck. I saw the car near the back of the lot, parked under the one flickering street lamp that still worked. It was a beat-up Ford, rusted around the wheel wells. The engine was indeed running. I could see the exhaust puffing white in the cold air. I pulled up behind it, flipping on my amber warning lights. The rain was coming down in sheets now. I zipped up my parka, grabbed my lockout kit, basically a glorified majestic wedge and a long reach tool, and stepped out. A man stepped out from the shadows of the restroom building. He must have been taking shelter under the overhang. He was big. Not muscular, just big. Heavy-set, wearing a soaking wet gray hoodie and jeans. He didn't have a coat. He walked toward me, his head down, hands in his pockets. "You the locksmith?" He mumbled. He didn't look up. "That's me," I said, trying to project authority. "You locked out?" "Yeah. Keys are in the ignition. Phone is in there too." I walked up to the driver's side window. Sure enough, the keys were dangling in the ignition. The car was idling rough, shaking slightly. I peered inside. The back seat was piled high with trash bags, fast food wrappers, old clothes. A hoarder's car. "All right, let me get you open," I said. I wedged the airbag into the top corner of the door frame and started to pump it. The metal groaned as the door flexed, creating a small gap. I slid the long metal rod in, aiming for the unlock button on the armrest. The man was standing right behind me. Too close. I could smell him over the rain, a mix of stale sweat and something metallic like copper. "Can you step back a bit, sir?" I asked, not taking my eyes off the tool. "Just for safety." He didn't move. "Just open it." His voice had changed. It was deeper, more aggressive. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. My instincts, honed by years of working in bad neighborhoods, were screaming at me. Something is wrong. I hit the unlock button with the rod. Click. "All right, you're in," I said, pulling my tools out and stepping away quickly. The man didn't move toward the door. He just stood there, staring at me. The rain dripped off his nose. "Open the trunk." I blinked. "What? The trunk?" he said. "My spare tire is in there." "I need to check it." "Sir, the car is unlocked. You can pop the trunk from the driver's seat." He took a step toward me. He was fast for a big guy. "The latch is broken. You have to pick it. Open the trunk." He reached into his hoodie pocket. I saw the outline of something hard. A gun? A knife? I didn't want to find out. My heart was hammering so hard, I thought he could hear it. "Okay," I said, raising my hands. "Okay, no problem. I'll pick the trunk." I walked to the back of the car. He followed, standing right at my shoulder. I knelt down, trying to keep my hands steady. The lock on a '98 Taurus is simple, a wafer lock. I inserted my tension wrench and the rake pick. As I worked the lock, I noticed the car moving, not the vibration of the engine. The car was rocking, rhythmic thumps coming from inside the trunk. I froze. "Wind's strong tonight," the man said. His voice was right in my ear. It wasn't the wind. Someone was in there. I looked at the lock. I could pop it in 2 seconds. If I did, whoever was in there would be exposed. If I did, this man would likely kill me. It's seized," I lied. "The pins are rusted. I need my lubricant spray from the truck." I started to stand up. The man put a hand on my shoulder. His grip was like a vice. "You don't need spray. Open it, or you don't leave." He pressed the object in his pocket against my hip. Definitely a gun. I had no choice. I knelt back down. My mind was racing. If I opened it, I was a witness. If I didn't, I was a corpse. I needed a distraction. "Almost got it," I said. I torqued the tension wrench hard. I felt the cylinder turn. The latch clicked. The trunk lid didn't just pop up. It flew open, pushed from the inside. A girl, maybe 20 years old, bound with duct tape, gagged, stared up at me with eyes wide with terror. She was thrashing, kicking. For a split second, time stopped. I looked at her. She looked at me. The man behind me let out a sigh, almost like he was disappointed. "Now look what you did," he whispered. I heard the safety click off. I didn't think. I reacted. I still had the tension wrench in my left hand and the heavy steel pick in my right. I spun around, swinging my right arm in a chaotic, desperate arc. The steel pick sharpened from years of use, caught him in the neck. He roared, a gurgling, wet sound, and stumbled back, clutching his throat. The gun dropped from his pocket and skittered across the wet pavement. I didn't go for the gun. I grabbed the girl's arm. "Get up, run." She scrambled out of the trunk, falling onto the asphalt. The man was on his knees, blood pouring between his fingers, his eyes wide with shock. He lunged for us. I grabbed the girl by the back of her shirt and dragged her toward my truck. We scrambled inside. I slammed the locks. The man was banging on the window, smearing blood on the glass, his face a mask of dying rage. I threw the truck into reverse and floored it. I didn't stop. I didn't look back until we were 5 miles down the highway. I called the state troopers. They found him dead in the parking lot. He had bled out. The girl was a college student he had carjacked 3 hours earlier. He had been driving her car around, looking for a place to dump her. He had stopped at the rest area to do it, but locked the keys inside in his panic. I sat in the police station until morning, shaking, wrapped in a blanket. They called me a hero. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a man who had come within an inch of dying in a dark, rainy parking lot for a $50 service call. I don't work nights anymore. And every time I drive past a rest stop, especially in the rain, I don't look. I keep my eyes on the road, and I drive a little faster, because I know that sometimes the person standing in the rain isn't looking for help. They're looking for a witness. There is a smell to abandoned houses. It's not just mold or dust. It's the smell of stagnation. The smell of air that has been trapped in the dark for too long. I'm a foreclosure locksmith. My job is to go into houses that the bank has seized, drill out the old locks, install new ones, and secure the property. Usually, the previous owners are long gone. Usually. This happened last winter. I got a work order for a Victorian home in the historic district. The banknotes said the property had been vacant for 6 months. The previous owner, an elderly woman, had passed away, and the estate had defaulted. No next of kin. It was a gloomy afternoon. The sky the color of a bruise. The house was a monstrosity of peeling paint and turret windows. It sat on a hill, overgrown with weeds. It looked like the cliché haunted house from every horror movie you've ever seen. I don't believe in ghosts, but I do believe in squatters, and this place looked like a prime target. I walked up to the front porch. The wood creaked loudly under my boots. I checked the front door locked tight. I pulled out my drill. The lock was an old mortise cylinder, intricate brass. A shame to destroy it, but time was money. I drilled the pins, turned the cylinder with a screwdriver, and the heavy door groaned open. The inside was dark. The windows were boarded up from the outside with plywood. The only light came from the open front door behind me. I clicked on my heavy-duty flashlight. "Bank contractor." I yelled out. "Anyone here?" Silence. Just the echo of my own voice bouncing off the high ceilings. I started my walkthrough. My job was to check every room, make sure the windows were latched, and verify the house was empty before I changed the back door locks. The furniture was still there. Sheets covered the sofas like shrouds. Dust motes danced in the beam of my flashlight. I moved through the living room, the dining room, the kitchen. In the kitchen, I paused. On the counter, there was a can of beans, open, a spoon resting inside. I touched the can. It was cold, but the metal wasn't dusty. Someone had eaten this recently. "Hello?" I called again, my hand resting on the hammer in my tool belt. "You need to leave. The police are on their way." It's a lie I always tell. It usually flushes out teenagers or homeless folks looking for a warm spot. Still silence. I moved to the staircase. The steps were carpeted in a deep, rotting red velvet. As I climbed, I noticed the portraits on the wall. Old, black and white photos of stern-looking people. But one of them was crooked. I shined my light on it. Behind the frame, a hole had been punched in the plaster. Small, maybe the size of a quarter. I looked closer. It wasn't just a hole. It was a peephole. Someone had bored through the wall from the other side. A cold chill ran down my spine. I hurried up the stairs, checking the bedrooms. Empty, empty. And I got to the end of the hall. The door to the attic. It was padlocked from the outside. A heavy, brand new master lock. That made no sense. Why would you padlock an attic from the hallway? Unless you were trying to keep something in. Or unless you lived up there and locked it when you left. I should have left right then. I should have walked out, called the cops, and waited in the van. But I had a job to do, and I was stupid. I pulled out my bolt cutters. Snap. The padlock fell to the floor. I opened the door. A steep, narrow staircase led up into the darkness. The smell wafting down was wretched. Urine and rotting meat. I crept up the stairs, flashlight shaking. The attic was huge, and it was lived in. There was a mattress on the floor, surrounded by piles of garbage. But it wasn't just garbage. It was collections. A pile of shoes. A pile of driver's licenses. A pile of keys. I stepped closer to the pile of keys. There were hundreds of them. Car keys, house keys. And next to them, a stack of work orders. I picked one up. It was a foreclosure order for a house 2 blocks away, dated 3 months ago. I picked up another, a different house. I realized with a jolt of terror what I was looking at. These weren't just collections. They were trophies. Trophies from other houses. Trophies from other contractors. The sound came from downstairs. The front door. I froze. I had left the front door wide open to let light in. The sound I just heard was the heavy oak door slamming shut. Then, the distinct metallic thunk of a deadbolt being thrown. I was trapped. I killed my flashlight instantly. Darkness swallowed me. I crouched behind a stack of old trunks, my heart beating so loud I felt like it was vibrating the floorboards. Heavy footsteps, slow, deliberate. They were coming up the main staircase. He wasn't trying to be quiet. He knew I was there. I heard a voice, a low, raspy humming. It was a nursery rhyme. 3 blind mice. See how they run? The footsteps reached the second-floor hallway. They stopped at the bottom of the attic stairs. I know you're up there, a voice called out. It was giddy, childlike. You broke my lock. That was rude. I looked around frantically for a weapon. I had my hammer. I had my drill. The footsteps started up the attic stairs. I had nowhere to go. The attic windows were small dormers, painted shut and likely 30 feet off the ground. The beam of a flashlight cut across the attic ceiling. He was here. I gripped my hammer. As his head crested the top of the stairs, I didn't wait. I screamed and charged. The light blinded me, but I swung the hammer with everything I had. I felt it connect with something soft, a shoulder, an arm. The man grunted and fell backward, tumbling down the narrow attic stairs. The flashlight spun away, illuminating his face for a split second. He was wearing a mask made of duct tape. Just gray tape wrapped around his head with holes cut for the eyes. I didn't wait to see if he was unconscious. I scrambled down the stairs, jumping over his prone body. He grabbed at my ankle. His grip was wet and slippery. I kicked him hard in the face. He let go with a howl. I sprinted down the hallway, down the main stairs. I hit the front door and fumbled for the thumb turn to unlock the deadbolt. It wouldn't turn. I twisted it, panic rising in my throat. It was jammed. Or no. I looked closely at the lock in the dim light. It wasn't the lock I had drilled. The cylinder was gone. He had removed the core while I was upstairs. There was no way to unlock it. I heard the man laughing from the top of the stairs. Mouse in a trap. Mouse in a trap. I turned and ran to the living room. The windows were boarded. I grabbed a heavy dining chair and hurled it at the window. The glass shattered, but the plywood held. Coming to get you. He sang. I saw the kitchen. The back door. I sprinted into the kitchen. The back door was glass sliding patio door. I didn't bother trying to unlock it. I threw my heavy tool bag through the glass. It shattered with a deafening crash. I dove through the jagged hole, slicing my arms and face, landing in the wet grass of the backyard. I scrambled up and ran. I ran through the weeds, climbed the rotting back fence, and collapsed onto the sidewalk of the neighboring street. A neighbor walking her dog saw me covered in blood, gasping for air, and called the police. They surrounded the house. They sent in a K-9 unit. They found him hiding in the crawl space. His name was Arthur. He had been a maintenance man for the bank years ago until he was fired for stalking tenants. He had been living in foreclosed homes, moving from one to the next using the master keys he had stolen. In the attic, they found the bodies of 2 other contractors who had gone missing the previous year. They were stuffed inside the walls. I quit the foreclosure business the next day. I work in a shop now, cutting keys behind a counter. I don't go into houses anymore. I don't like empty rooms. And I certainly don't like the sound of a lock clicking shut when I know I'm the only one who's supposed to have the key. Because sometimes when you think you're breaking into an empty house, you're actually breaking into someone's home. And they don't like visitors. And that's all for tonight. Remember, the most terrifying monsters are the ones that look just like us. The ones who might even live right next door. If these stories serve as a good reminder to trust your instincts, then show your support and like and subscribe. Hitting that bell means you'll get a warning before the next nightmare begins. Sleep well, if you can.